Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Squadron, president of Our Energy Policy, and we're very pleased today to continue our Spotlight series with Gretchen Watkins, president of Shell USA, addressing some of the key critical questions in our energy transformation. We're going to get into a dialogue with Gretchen in a minute, but I want to welcome everyone and encourage all of you to use OEP's various resources and programs as you work on the critical energy issues and challenges that face all of us today. So Gretchen, great to see you here. Thank you for joining us. We're really delighted to have you part of our Spotlight series. And thanks again, of course, to Shell for supporting OEP.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here with you today.
Well, let's jump right in and start with a question that I think is very top of mind for so many people today, given all the events that are happening around the world. Energy security is really on everyone's radar screen. And in addressing issues of energy security, do you all find that affects the pace of all the other issues you're working on in the energy transformation? Does it accelerate things? Does it slow things down? How does it really affect it?
Bill, I think that we need to think about the energy transformation that's going on as one that where we don't just pick security over decarbonization or affordability over availability. We need to look at all of those things together. So we need to make sure that it's all of those things to all people. Now, that is way easier said than done because there's a ton of external forces at work at any one period of time that creates, I would say, obstacles to having that all happen very quickly. What are those forces? Overall economics, we have inflation today. It's coming down a little bit, but still plays a major role in our national and global economy. We have two wars going on in the world, and so geopolitics plays a huge role in energy. Energy systems globally are interconnected, and whenever you have a disruption in one place, it affects many, many parts of the energy system. I would also say that the overall society demand for lower carbon products, lower carbon fuels, helps support a faster transition. But I think we need to look at the transition as one, not as, are you going to decarbonize or are you going to have secure energy? But we need to do both of those at the same time.
And so as you all work on these issues sort of simultaneously, has the security requirements created sort of additional responsibility work on your end, or is it all part of the planning that you undertake under normal circumstances?
I would say energy security is a huge part of what we feel is our job. And we look at the full suite of energy that we supply to our customers as part of that security. So here in the US, for example, we look at the US Gulf of Mexico as a source of oil and gas that the world needs and the country needs today. We're here to provide that in an affordable way, and frankly, it's the lowest carbon footprint barrels and molecules that we can consume as a country because we're not shipping it over from somewhere else in the world. That said, I think there's a need, and we are moving to fulfill that for lower carbon options, whether that's renewable fuels, renewable energy, or frankly, just looking at how we operate our plants and the emissions that are created, and reducing and eliminating those emissions.
And as you think about the broad picture, the sort of broad puzzle that represents the energy transformation, and it's a very complex picture, as we know. But if you did have to identify 2, 3, 4 priorities or keys to really making that happen as we think about it, what would you really single out?
I would say there's sort of three things that come to mind for me. I think first of all, collaboration is so important. And that's collaboration between companies like Shell and communities where we live and work, collaboration between governments and the business community, governments and society. So collaboration, it can't be just one of those groups. It's got to be everyone moving together, everyone moving forward together. I think the second piece I would call out is just good policy. And we've seen actually quite a bit of policy come out of the current government that I think does support the energy transformation, talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the tax clean energy credits and tax incentives that now are in place for investments in things like hydrogen and renewable energy like wind and solar. I think good policy is really important, and we probably will continue to need more good policy to drive this transformation forward. And then maybe the last thing I would say that is really important and that we keep our eyes on is just that this transformation needs to be inclusive. It can't be a transformation just for the wealthy. We need to bring everybody forward together, which means that that's secure, clean, and affordable. That needs to be available to all people.
And it's interesting that you really highlight the need for everyone to be pulling together, because it's such a major endeavor that really do any single or a couple of entities doing it alone just doesn't really stand a chance of getting to where we need to. One of the things that came up in the news recently was Shell's new CEO with some quotes about Shell moving back to oil and gas and away from climate commitments. And I was just wondering how those observations touch on Shell's plan and translates into Shell's efforts in the U.S.
Yeah, I think we remain very much committed to the framework we've been using called Powering Progress, which really talks about creating great value for our shareholders, talks about powering people's lives, providing sources of energy, clean sources of energy. It talks about protecting nature. And so I think and in fact, it talks about net zero by 2050. We remain incredibly committed to that. So those four goals remain consistent. I think what you'll see us doing is really looking to simplify how we work, focus on performance, and really be very disciplined in how we allocate capital. So we're going to be spending less capital this year, next year, and the following year. We've reduced the amount of capital down to about $22 to $24 billion a year. That's down $3 to $4 billion from where we were previously. And we're also looking through the simplification efforts to take quite a bit of cost out of the system. So $2 to $3 billion out of the system by 2025. And so all of that is really aimed at, let's look at the businesses that are going to be profitable, that are also going to drive this transformation, that are going to enable us to reach net zero by 2050. And that will include hydrocarbon businesses like the one I mentioned in the Gulf of Mexico, but it also includes investments in things like carbon capture and sequestration, which we're looking at. And we've got quite a large footprint around the Louisiana Gulf Coast, looking at capturing our emissions through carbon capture there. Also looking at hydrogen, investing in hydrogen as a clean source of fuel for heavy industry, our industry included in that. So we see a lot of opportunities coming forward, but you will see us very much focused on more value with less emissions.
It really sounds like, I mean, you say it's a reduction, but $22–24 billion of capital investment is a very significant number. And it sounds like it's really split between both traditional and clean energy and new initiatives. I wonder how much is going toward innovation, research, not specifically numbers, but whether that's an important part of your agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that we continue to invest in innovation and research and development. And we're looking at doing that not just ourselves, but we're looking at really critical partnerships, sometimes with academic institutions, sometimes with other companies, sometimes with government and communities. And so that will remain certainly a very big part of how we look at the future of energy. I would also tell you that over the course of the next 3 years, we're going to be spending between 10 and $15 billion on clean energy, lower emissions, energy products that have lower emissions, whether that's renewable diesel or sustainable aviation fuel. So we're spending a big chunk of our CapEx and OpEx on that area so that we're able to offer customers products that have lower emissions or no emissions.
You'd mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Gretchen, the real essential part of this movement forward as being inclusive and not leaving any communities out of the equation. And maybe you could speak for a minute to why the um, equitable energy aspect of this transformation is so important and the things that Shell is doing to address traditionally underserved communities.
Yeah, I think this is something that we've kept really front and center, and I would tell you that very humbly, we don't have all the answers for this. I feel like we're very much in a learning space and a listening space, but absolutely making sure that we bring the communities with us, communities where we live and work, communities where our customers live and work, so that this is a transformation, an energy transformation that impacts everyone in a positive way. And that's, like I said earlier, it's easier said than done. But some of the things that we're looking at have to do with, for example, spending more with diverse suppliers. So we've set an ambitious target by the end of this year that we'll be doubling the amount of money that we've spent previously. Took us a couple of years to get there, with diverse suppliers, whether that's minority owned, female owned businesses, which frankly sounds like it should be easy. Just go find a business that's owned by a person of color or a woman. But actually, oftentimes what we're doing is we're finding a person with a really good idea and some real drive to build a company. And it's something that Shell's been doing for quite some time. I've got an example of Mr. Lee Jackson, who back in 2010, 11, I think, came to us and said, "Hey, I've been working offshore for many years. I'd really like to build a business around service vessels for the offshore oil and gas business. I need a loan to get my first vessel." We signed a contract, provided him with that loan, and now he's one of our most significant contractors in terms of service vessels in the Gulf. And he's got a fleet, I think, of 10 vessels that he's built up over the last decade. And he competes with with every other company out there that's doing that kind of work. And so we've got a number of examples like that where we've invested in a person with a really good idea, building a business. And it's a long process. It's not something that you can turn on a dime and do. And we're continuing to look at ways we can hold workshops. For example, we've got a program called Livewire Louisiana, where we've brought in folks that have good ideas, or even just small businesses that they need to understand how to scale them up, how to create a P&L, how to actually get through the vendor system of a company like Shell, which oftentimes is not very easy. And so lots of community work, lots of listening to what we can do that will help the communities. And the supplier diversity is an example that I think has really already shown quite an impact in some of the places where we operate.
And that's really interesting because it sounds like the way you're describing it, the real key is not just to be open to support and inclusion and so forth, but really to be deliberate and proactive and look for ways in which to do it as opposed to sitting back and simply being open to it. And that sounds like the approach that you all have taken.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, I think I think you're exactly right, and we aren't going to get it right every time exactly. But working in this very collaborative spirit with the communities, with companies that are looking to grow their business, that's how we've found it to be most beneficial. And I think the other thing that is, we constantly have to remind ourselves is that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is something we really need to be committed to for the long term. Because if we're going to bring everybody forward through this transition, we're going to need to be in it for years and years, holding hands with the communities, holding hands with business partners, with the government, with our customers. I mean, that's the way this is going to work.
Well, as you know, Gretchen, OEP's community, which is thousands and thousands of energy professionals, leaders, stakeholders from really all corners of the community, from advocacy groups, trade associations, from oil and gas and clean energy companies, academia, government, nonprofits, from finance, from law. It really expands the whole kind of energy spectrum. as we wrap up, is there sort of one or two points that you would like to leave that community with from your perspective?
Yeah, Bill, one of the reasons I enjoy engaging with folks like you and your energy policy community is because I think if there's just a few people that listen to what you and I have talked about and are a little bit more curious about the energy transformation, then we will have done a good piece of work here together. So I would say just be curious. Everyone has a role to play, whether you're actually in the energy industry like you and I are, or whether you're in a completely different industry, or you're a student, or you're a policymaker. Everyone can have a role to play, whether it's the products you choose to use to power your home or your car, or even sometimes the products that that you use to put your coffee in, or your water in. Those all have an impact on the energy transformation, and they can have a very positive impact. And so I would say, be curious, go out and ask some questions, see how you can get involved, because there's a lot to be done, but frankly, there's, I think, a lot of opportunity for everybody in the space.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that sentiment because it's so consistent with the message that we really embrace, which is to everyone to be open and to be um, respectful of other views, and recognize that we're not going to get anywhere without cooperation. By fighting, it's not going to work. And so recognize that people have different opinions, and engaging with them is the best way to try to find a way forward. So we're so grateful to you for taking the time to be with us today, and we look forward to working with you and Shell, and really throughout the energy community as we go forward on all of these tough issues. So thanks again, and we really appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation.